Week 13 is officially in the books for the Bears. There really wasn't much to be surprised about, but maybe there is. We're going to get into all of that. The Bears lost to the Cardinals. They've now lost 6 of the last 7 games. But hey, the one win was against the now winner Detroit Lions, who beat Minnesota on Sunday afternoon, just as the Bears were losing to the Arizona Cardinals. What's up, guys? Welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. Usayd, and Max Smith here. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. You can follow myself and Max on Twitter at Usayd and at Max Smith ESM. Max, it's been a while because the Bears were coming off 9 or 10 days worth of rest as well as extra preparation after having played against Baltimore and Detroit within a 5-day span. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Just end of the year, crazy, working. And unfortunately, we don't have anything on Sunday to look forward to. The Bulls are steamrolling. So if you're a basketball guy, you're probably happy with that. The Illini have been resurgent in college hoops. If you're an Illini guy, Purdue, if you're a Purdue guy, number one for the first time ever. So there's a lot. And the Blackhawks have just kind of come out of nowhere here, winning their last 7 of their last 10. So there's a lot to like in the Chicago sports world outside of Chicago. But fortunately and unfortunately, this is a Bears YouTube, which means we have to, argue out into the void because for some reason nothing ever changes. You're completely right. This was an unsurprising. I'll put an asterisk next to that. It was an unsurprising loss, but the way that it happened, I think, was a little surprising. And there were also some positive surprises in there as well. So we're going to recap this interesting, dirty, cold, slushy game. How Andy Dalton kind of shot himself in the foot, shot the Bears in the foot. Are the Bears cursed? This is a question that I think needs to be proposed and have a potential answer to. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. And we're going to wrap it up by asking the question, are the Cardinals a legitimate Super Bowl team? After what we saw against us, one of the lesser teams in the league, after what we've seen on primetime television against some of the better teams. And of course, the Cardinals still have a season to finish out as well. Will we be watching them play in February? So those are what we're the topics for today. But first off, what exactly surprised you against the Cardinals and what didn't surprise you? So what's that asterisk next to the word surprised for you?
What didn't surprise me is the Bears were going to lose because when the schedule came out back in May, this was one of those games that you just circled and you're like, yeah, that's going to be a home loss unless the Bears come out in 2021. Just absolutely surprised a lot of people. But there's an underrated aspect of the Bears offense that I think no one is talking about or people are noticing, but we're not talking about enough because lost in all this talk about what is a good offense over the last couple seasons has been lack of details, lack of execution, just a broken offensive system. If you look at the Bears the last couple of weeks, and I'm not going to get into who the starting quarterback is or should be, because whether it's Andy Dalton or Justin Fields, you're noticing a small theme within the Bears offensive play calling. You're noticing essentially that the Bears are finally using ball control on offense. This is finally the ball control offense that a lot of us basically clamored and screaming for throughout 2019 as well as 2020, in the sense that you have an offensive line that is built to run block and be a run first team. Okay. And why is this offense built to run block and be a run first team? Because some of the best players, such as Cody Whitehair, okay, were, as well as you could throw in there a name like Jermaine Ifedi, who came from a very run heavy team in Seattle, by the way. All right, even though Ifedi hasn't played, the point is that these offensive linemen were basically built to be run blockers and run blockers first, not necessarily pass blockers. So the Bears are finally getting into this whole concept of what is a ball control offense. And they're basically telling the quarterback, hey, you don't need to be Superman to win us this game. We don't want you being Superman anyway. What we want, though, is for you to just be good enough. And you want to talk about offenses that know how to play ball control and basically chew the clock up, because this is a winning formula for offenses that don't have an elite player at the quarterback position. Look at Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill isn't elite by any means, but he's not the worst quarterback in the league either. He's not the worst starting quarterback in the league. He's shown time and time again, hey, if I'm feeding the ball to Derrick Henry, it opens up the offense more. I'm going to let Derrick Henry do the work. The Bears did the same thing on Sunday. So this is an offense that's finally realizing, and a team that's realizing more and more, ball control offense is what is going to go ahead and get it done. And we need to see more of that because we need to keep the ball out of the hands of an explosive offense. And again, this isn't the first time we've seen the Bears try to do this. Remember week 17 against Green Bay last year, the Bears did the exact same thing, but unfortunately, the same problems that were prevalent in 2020 are still prevalent in 2021 because you can have the ball for 7 or 8 minutes, and the Bears had 2 back-to-back drives of just over 7 minutes. But the issue comes into where the Bears just haven't been able to execute field goals at any level, unless it's Madden, are not going to get the job done. Touchdowns. And so the point is this is what surprised me is the Bears are finally going ball control and having the ball for a significantly more amount of time than their opponent. Chicago had the ball for about 34 minutes. Arizona had the ball for about 25 minutes. Okay. That's like what, 10 minutes roughly. So that's how this thing is going. Now, unfortunately, the problem is that it's also too little too late.
Yeah, there's, when I went back and rewatched this game, the number one thing that I noticed what was working for the Bears offense was the power run game. That's something we've talked about for a while. That's something that I feel we'll continue talking about throughout the continuation of the season into the, off season, is running in between the tackles works for this team. It's worked against really good defenses before, and it worked against this really good defense as well. Remember, the Arizona Cardinals defense is nothing to write home about. They're a legitimate top 10 squad in the NFL. There's a reason why they're the number one NFC seed, and it's not just because of Kyler Murray and that explosive offense. It's because of complementary football, right? This team is a much better 2018 Bears. Like the way that they're able to create turnovers, they've consistently done it through forced fumbles primarily. The way that they're able to create turnovers and the way that their offense is able to capitalize is a winning formula. Crazy that they've won so many games, right? But we were able to successfully move the ball multiple drives against one of the better defenses in the NFL. This isn't the only time that this has happened. So there's legitimate execution occurring, right? Our tackles are playing fantastic. David Montgomery is, again, an elite running back. Everybody who watches Bears at any point in the season or the past 3 years knows that, right? And he's just getting better and better and better, which is fantastic. What we didn't see again, which we haven't seen for 3 years, is a efficient passing game. Outside of the flashes that Mr. Trubisky showed, and honestly, 2 to 3 weeks of Justin Fields showing that he can move the ball downfield in an offense that, guess what, folks, isn't designed to move the ball downfield in splash plays. Chunk plays don't really exist in this offense, which is a weird thing to say because we're in the era of chunk plays, right? Get the ball, put it in the end zone as quickly as possible because guess what? You're going to get the ball back again, put it in the end zone as quickly as possible. That's kind of the mantra of NFL offenses, but this offense isn't designed like that. And I think that it was never intentionally designed like that because it was designed to play complementary football with that defense. So why did it work in Matt Nagy's first year? He said, okay, this is a great defensive unit. Vic Fangio knows exactly what he's doing. We're going to let our defense kind of lead the way, and we'll punch it in the end zone when we need to. Well, our defense isn't nearly where it was in 2018 or 2019. That's very much clear and evident. Xavier Crawford had a terrible game. We don't seem to have an answer at that second cornerback position. Jalen Johnson got burnt, because he got burnt. It's DeAndre Hopkins. What are you going to do? But the point stands, correct, is this entire offense that's built on ball control. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that if you're able to put up 22 points plus consistently per game. But the issue is Bears haven't been able to do that. But when we watch them drive down the field, when we watch them make really good plays and execution across the board and some really smart play calls in and out, we're looking at a 1st and 10 off the tackle or run that picks up another free 10 yards as an automatic free first down. Like that's the definition of a good ball control offense. But then what do we see? We see Andy Dalton throw an interception, granted off the hands of Jakeem Grant, intercepted. We see Cole Kmet's crazy, weird. I don't even know what to call it, like do-si-do, or just throws the ball, slippery. I understand. Cole Kmet redeemed himself, by the way. He had, a pretty good game outside of that. I'm a Cole Kmet stan. But the point is mistakes is really what defines this team, is that every time there's some momentum, every time the engine starts kicking, something within the car completely falls apart and they find themselves 10 miles behind the rest of the race going, why did it break?
Right. And I think you have to look at it this way, right? This was originally we're seeing a trend in kind of we're seeing a bit of a shift, I should say, in what the Bears are now doing, because before it was all, well, this is a defense first team, they're going to have to rely on the defense, on the backs of Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack. You don't see that anymore. You don't see that because what's happening now is the offense is actually taking over and has looked like the better unit over the last couple weeks. Is it too little too late? Absolutely. But is it still kind of encouraging to see that a lot of the players in terms of the offensive line, some of the wide receivers, some of the tight ends, a couple of the running backs that are going to be back next year, and then you factor in Justin Fields, is it going to be encouraging to see? Yes. So is this a group of players that's going through so many growing pains, more than anyone can count? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, we have to keep something in mind, is that all this is just merely benefiting what is expected to be one of the youngest teams in the NFL over the next couple seasons when a mass roster purge happens. And one other thing that we have to understand is that the Cardinals can also serve as a perfect example for what the Bears need to do with Justin Fields. I'm not saying go out and cough up, 2 4th-round picks for an all-pro wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins that's going to be in Canton, Ohio someday. That would be great. The Bears, unfortunately, well, they don't have the resources. But if you look at what the Cardinals were doing, they were pretty much going play after play after play. And it's an offense that moves so quickly in terms of just, it's like, yeah, let's get that first down. Boom, boom, boom. Let's keep moving. The Bears need to implement some of the same stuff that they're seeing from Cliff Kingsbury for Justin Fields. The reason I say that is because Kyler Murray is a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal talent. He's a quarterback with a baseball background. You know who else is a quarterback with a baseball background? Russell Wilson. Another one, Colin Kaepernick. The point is that these dual threat athletes, and Justin Fields also played shortstop, by the way, I believe in high school. The point is that these quarterbacks who've played football are phenomenal athletes, but they also function in offensive systems where it, quite frankly, does not make them think, and you're not slowing the game down by taking 30 seconds off the clock every single play after play after play. All right. You're not doing that. You're just saying, hey, let's hurry up and move it. Let's play fast. And what's the advantage of that? The advantage of that is that it doesn't matter how good the defense is, you are going to keep that defense on its toes no matter what. And yet, what is that going to basically allow you to do? Not only is it going to give you the opportunity to move the ball efficiently, it's also going to give you the opportunity to essentially just take what the defense gives you. And right now, that's what the Bears are kind of lacking. Sometimes this offense takes what the defense gives them. Other times it absolutely doesn't. And you have Andy Dalton or Justin Fields standing back there, just looking downfield, waiting for something to get open. And then nothing's open. All of a sudden you look at the top of your screen. What do you see? Oh, there's David Montgomery completely wide open.
Yeah, so two things right off of that. David Montgomery had a fantastic game in the pass world. Outside of just handoffs. Because again, we're finally seeing David Montgomery being utilized as a safety, as a valve, and Andy Dalton knows that, and that's kind of the savvy you do get with a veteran. Is, hey, none of my guys are open on the design timing route. Let me just punch it over to my trusty running back who knows how to make guys miss or can run people over. So that's a great aspect that we finally are seeing in this offense that I'd love to see continue. Whoever is the next OC in Chicago, I think is probably watching that and going, yeah, David Montgomery is a weapon, regardless of where we put him on the field. But I wanted to bring us back specifically to a point in the game where it's 22-14. Defense just made a stop. It's 3rd and 5. We're in our side of the field. I think we're on like the 30-yard line. It's a 3rd and 5, and we're in ridiculously stupid. I want to say it's like it's like a single back formation, but there's one tight end, there's 2 wide, and Khalil Herbert's back there. It's a complete timing route where all the receivers are on one side. They're all on Andy Dalton's right side. So we're not out wide. We're in tight 2. All of the receivers run essentially the same exact route. It's a weird little 10-yard, it's not, I don't even know what to call it. Like it's weird, like a skinny post, I think. I wouldn't even know. I watched it multiple times because I was trying to figure out what the route was. But they all just ran straight verticals and were peeling towards the sideline. The Cardinals didn't have to defend it because there was like no reason to. Like the guys literally just stood by the line and were like, "What's going on?" They were looking at each other, trying to figure out like what are the Bears trying to do here. Meanwhile, the Cardinals sent everybody outside of their safeties and like 2 cornerbacks who played zone right on the. So my point is, go back and watch that play and ask yourself, why in the hell would an offense that's running the ball effectively, that's able to hit the middle of the field pretty effectively, because they were doing it. They were able to get the ball in this little soft in the middle of the field a couple times to Jakeem Grant or to Cole Kmet or Damiere Byrd, because they were open a good amount of time in the middle of that field. Why would they completely switch up that code right there for a play that makes absolutely no sense? The answer is, of course, coaching incompetence, right? Like, that's just not something that makes sense in that situation. And it's really easy for me to go and sit here, my Madden 10,000 IQ and go, well, I would run something a little bit different. But when the defense is entirely prepared for that and they're going to send as much pressure as possible, and they weren't even hiding it too, and Andy Dalton doesn't have an opportunity to make a read and make a play and switch us into something completely different out of that, that tells you that there isn't a second read on that play, right? Which makes 0 sense to me either. So there, like, that right there is the entire Matt Nagy experiment in a nutshell. You know exactly what you should do. You know exactly what you should be able to do. And guess what? You can't do either of those things. You're forced to do the just absolutely most asinine thing you could possibly do. Guess what? Defense made a stop. Offensive time to make an opportunity to put the ball in the end zone. You threw 2 interceptions, which led to 14 points. It is now it's a 2-score game, but if you put the ball in the end zone, you're down by 3 as compared to down by 10. And now you have to get bailed out by your punter, who takes a roughing the kicker penalty. Oh, and the play after that, you throw an interception anyway. So I guess what was the point, right? It's just a domino effect of one idiot thing. One really incompetent play call causes all of the dominoes to collapse. And for me, I'll kick it over to you, but for me, that tells me it's a confidence thing. That once the players are motivated and that car is starting to drive and it's starting to go, one little thing comes in from the booth where it's just a stupid play call. Or guess what? You can't even hear the play call because radio's not working. The players go, what the hell are we doing? What's going on, man? And then it's just hard to pick that up again.
Well, you mentioned interceptions, and I want to talk about Andy Dalton because on a baseline, when we scratch the surface and you look at the final numbers from this game, or you even just go back and you watch the film, the obvious answer is yes, Andy Dalton did shoot the Bears in the foot. But when you look at it, the Bears had one job this game. The offense, well, theoretically, I should say 2 jobs. The offense, his first job was to not give the Cardinals short field positions, which is an issue because that's exactly what happened. Like the Bears' first 2 drives, where it was just back-to-back interceptions. Okay, very ideal for your starting quarterback that you're paying $10 million to, that you pretty much doubled or quadrupled down on and said, well, he was going to be the starter no matter what. And then obviously I said this on Twitter and people came after me. I was just like, look at Matt Nagy. He's made a complete mess of the quarterback situation. It should have been Justin Fields all along, and now we're seeing why it should have been Justin Fields all along and why Andy Dalton probably never should have been given a fair chance at starting. But we're not going to discuss that. If you look at Andy Dalton in those games, so there were in this game, there was I think 1 or 2 interceptions that I'm not going to sit like I'm going to look at those, but I'm not going to blame it. Why? Because the one to Cole Kmet, one target to Cole Kmet needs to come down with that being like a 6'6" tight end that's 250 pounds. The first one, though, I believe it was intended for Jakeem Grant. That was a really terribly thrown pass. You can just tell on that play, Andy Dalton did not fully step into the throw, didn't fully turn his hips. He absolutely wasn't even accurate with the ball at all. So it was kind of like, I'm just going to overthrow it or underthrow it, and that's going to be it. We're going to call it a day. So the point is that it's like, when we were saying on this channel throughout the summer, yeah, we understand why Matt Nagy wants to start Andy Dalton, but you also have to look at these red flags when it comes to Andy Dalton. This game pretty much summed up why the Bears never should have given Andy Dalton a fair chance to start in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and we saw this multiple times. We saw this against Detroit, and we saw this against Baltimore, that Andy Dalton's accuracy just isn't there. Like, it's a problem. Outside of a couple crazy good deep balls, outside of, you know, a good throw here or there, consistently his accuracy isn't there. What did we see on the other hand with Justin, though? We saw consistent accuracy that was being muffled by drops and inconsistent play from his wide receiver core or his tight ends, right? So either you have Andy Dalton, who will sometimes put the ball in the right spot, who will make at-line adjustments sometimes when it's available, I guess. Or you have Justin Fields, who is consistently putting the ball in bread baskets, who still has issues reading some defenses, still has some decision-making issues, but has every intangible that you like mechanically to bring success to the NFL, right? So the answer is clearly, yeah, let me go with the young guy, because this is the whole point of this experiment, is to let the young guy play, is to let the young guy grow. And we saw that. His game against Pittsburgh was his crown jewel of this season. And I think what we should do is over the summer, over the offseason and into the summer, go back to that game, do a super duper deep dive into it, and understand exactly what clicked. What did he start seeing in the second half that was allowing him to completely dice up the Steelers defense, which, again, remember, at that time was a top 5 defense in the NFL. You know, I guess maybe they fell off a little bit over the past couple of weeks, because who knows what's happening in this league right now. But the question was, is he healthy? Is he good enough to play against the Cardinals? And we didn't really know. There's more smoke screens from Hallis Hall, but there's Darnell Mooney who came out today and told reporters that if Justin's hurt, he's having a really hard time showing it. Like as in, it looks like he's fine. Justin's not acting like he's hurt. He's not walking around like he's hurt. So Darnell Mooney kind of potentially hinted towards reporters that maybe the locker room doesn't even know what's going on with Justin Fields' injury status. Again, remember how we found out about Justin Fields' ribs was from his best friend's Instagram, who went, nope, they're not cracked. There was a report that said that there was a tiny crack, like a tiny little crack, or a fracture, rather, a tiny fracture. I haven't heard anything if that's confirmed or not from Hallis Hall. It could be. Go ahead, look it up. Not off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But it's infuriating that we don't know information about the future of our franchise's injury, right? You have players who are saying he looks fine, who are basically telling reporters, I don't know why he's not playing. I don't know what's going on here, right? And then it just all goes back into what's happening at the very top of the operations. And then I want to, comment real quick on a couple of things before I pass it over. Is the top of the organization is clearly failing the rest of the organization. When you have consistent microphone issues like this team has had at home for 2 weeks, something's going on when it hasn't been fixed, right? When you're playing at the stadium that your organization has played at since 1976, and it's cold and it's wet and it's rainy, and you decide to wear tacky gloves that turn into absolute butterballs when it rains, are you kidding me? What is it, like 1947, where you decide not to wear turf shoes on the frozen ground instead of wearing your cleats? Like it's the 47 national championship game. It's ridiculous, right? There's a great article in Sun Times published about that. But no, like here's the thing. It's a curse, right? The curse that the Bears have is called gross negligence at the top of the organization. It's completely ridiculous. This team, if it wants to get over its hurdles at player personnel, have to get over its hurdles at front office, have to get over its hurdles at equipment management, have to get over its hurdles at just all management across the board, coaching wise. And there are some really great talent in the front office of the Bears. So I want to recuse that. I'm just so passionate. We have great scouting directors. We have a great scouting team. But I need the next guy to come up. And if that's Ryan Pace, takes a step down. If there's somebody new in town, I need the guy to come up. I need the guy to look at the entire organization, and I need him to trim the fat. And he needs to go, this is exactly what's not working with this franchise. This is exactly what is working with this franchise. What's not working anymore, adios. What is working, guess what? We have a Super Bowl to win. I mean, it's a lot easier said than done, but like realistically, how difficult is that to happen if they bring in a new guy?
Well, I think, look, the biggest question that everyone's going to have, or that everyone has right now, is who is the next guy going to be? People tend to forget sometimes that the Bears moved on from Lovie Smith, who won 10 games in 2012, for a guy who should probably not even be a position coach, let alone a quality control assistant or a quality control coach in the NFL, and Mark Trestman. Okay. I don't know why the Bears decided to go with Mark Trestman over Bruce Arians. That was always a puzzling decision to me. But the reason I bring it up, as long with firing Jerry Angelo and promoting Phil Emery to GM and naming him the new GM, before Emery was ultimately fired alongside his golden child, Mark Trestman. And then the Bears pretty much hired Pace, who hired John Fox, who then fired John Fox, then hired Matt Nagy. Now is probably going to fire Matt Nagy. What I want to say is this, before we move on to our final issue here, is that the next guy up is not always going to be better than the last guy up. And the Bears have to understand right now, they bring in someone from a proven organization, from a winning organization, except the Patriots. The Saints, can you really classify them as a winning organization? I mean, okay, they've been in the playoffs year in and year out. Have they won consistently though? No. I mean, after the Super Bowl, there was point 3, 4, 5 years where they were basically winning 7 games every season and having to drop 50 points a game to even stay in those games, because the defense and offense was that devoid of talent and not bad. And now you're seeing that Drew Brees covered up a lot of those holes on a Saints roster that's pretty much very similar to the last 3 or 4 years of Drew Brees' career. And then on top of that, you have this GM that was hired in 2015 that quite frankly made sense, because he was the young, trendy, energetic new kid in town that everybody wanted to be around, and everyone loved Ryan Pace's passion and energy and enthusiasm, as well as his smarts. And those things are still prevalent to this day. But also, the Bears need to look at Ryan Pace and say, hey, we love you, we value you, we love what you bring to the organization. But at the end of the day, when it comes to making the decisions on the football side of things at a micro level in terms of being the general manager, maybe this isn't the best fit for you. Maybe you need a more expansive role that includes presidents of football operations. That's what needs to happen. And quite frankly, here's just my bold prediction for what I think will happen in the offseason. I think the Bears are going to move on from Matt Nagy and then hire a new head coach. That's already a foregone conclusion. It's just a matter of who is it going to be and when is the firing going to take place. And then what you have is you keep Ryan Pace and you go in-house for the next general manager. So Champ Kelly, a front office member and executive that a lot of people around the league have spoken very highly about when I talk to people. Okay. He was second in line last year to go ahead and get the Broncos job after George Patton, who is now the current general manager of the Broncos and is going to fire Vic Fangio. So you can go ahead and grab Champ Kelly, okay, promote him to general manager, promote Ryan Pace to president of football operations, and then let Champ Kelly make the next coaching hire. And really researching Champ Kelly's background, I think that you're going to grab a head coach who's smart, but also savvy enough and just proven a bit more. One of the big things that's going to come with this Bears head coaching gig is going to be short-term security, right? Job security that is going to revolve around Justin Fields. And so the Bears are going to have Justin Fields through 2024. They're going to have to make a decision on his contract after the 2023 season, right? So you're basically going to bring in a general manager as well as a head coach and say, hey, you have 3 solid seasons to get this show figured out. And last point I'm going to make here before I pass it off to you. One thing that people have to understand is that when there is a new general manager, or if there is a new general manager, and when there is a new head coach, the Bears are going to be much better equipped to rebuild and turn around this team and this roster going into 2022 than they were when Ryan Pace first arrived in 2015. Because what's the difference? Those teams had 3 building blocks, right? They had Kyle Long, Alshon Jeffrey, and Kyle Fuller. This team has way more building blocks, as well as some pretty proven players in place like Roquan Smith and Khalil Mack. So naturally, it should be a quick rebuild.
Yeah, there's definitely a shorter turnaround on this team than there was in 2015. And you know, the only downside, of course, is this year's draft, lack of capital. But you know, it is what it is. If we do move on to a new general manager, that decision has to be made sooner than later. I don't feel comfortable with this organization going into February without a new general manager. That's something that needs to be done before the spring months, because that's when all of the free agency talks happen. You know, like that's when strategy needs to be figured out. What's going to happen? Who are the guys we're going to target? Who are the guys we're trying to bring on? And, you know, that's why I think at this point, it's difficult from just a timing perspective to go Ryan Pace isn't going to have a hand in the organization this offseason. It's really difficult to say that because they're already planning offseason right now, right? Like this is something that's already being had internally discussion-wise. Contracts talks are already happening. This is a thing that just the mechanics of business. It's already happening. So it's really difficult to just completely kick the guy out, find a new guy, completely pick up where that guy was, and go, hey, by the way, you have a shorter turnaround to do it. If they're going to do it, they're going to have to do it quickly. Now, when we move over to coaches, we're going to talk about this for a long time until it's official, and then we'll probably complain about it for a long time because they didn't pick the guy that we wanted. There's a lot of good quality coaching candidates. Not all of them are good quality head coaching candidates, but there are good quality coaching candidates. Now, there's one name that I just want to pass out there for a potential offensive coordinator role that's currently within the Bears staff that seemed to be overlooked a lot, and that's former University of Texas Longhorns head coach Tom Herman, who's currently on the staff as an offensive analyst and a special projects coordinator. This guy was basically, you know, considered an offensive guru at Texas. His teams did fairly well. He won 4 bowl games. He never really was able to, you know, punch up at some of the other Big 12 teams, like the Oklahomas, like the OSUs. But the Longhorns were consistently in the pack, right? And they had some recruitment issues. They had some other talent issues during Tom Herman's tenure there. But that team, that offense was consistently performing. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at. You know, the Bears love to promote. They love to get somebody in and keep them there as long as possible. I think that's a name to look at because you have a couple of guys on this. You have a couple of young guys on this, and by young I mean like in NFL years, on this offensive control staff, on this offensive staff in general, who may not like what's happening, right? Because I mean, we know that there's some internal strife going on in Hallis Hall, and a guy like Tom Herman, who's at his first year at the organization, isn't going to have much sway. But he has a proven track record in the college field. And what we've seen pretty consistently is guys who found incredible offensive success at college are starting to find pretty good offensive success in the NFL when they have a pretty solid run and gun college style quarterback in the NFL, right? I mean, look at some of this. I'm going to look at Cliff right now, who we just kicked our butts, right? He's doing incredibly well. He set up Patrick Mahomes in that Raiders Texas Tech offense and is now doing exactly the same thing with Kyler Murray, right? I'm not saying that Cliff Kingsbury is Tom Herman, but it's a name to start thinking about. And it's because we're at this point, our list could be 100 names long because we're just so desperate for somebody. But unless he gets poached by a college, which is very likely, a former Longhorn head coach is a pretty good thing to have on the resume if you're looking to hop over back into college football. But if he's looking to stay around in the big league some more, I think there's probably going to be an opportunity for him to get promotion because this is his first year in this team. And this team, I'm not saying it's all him. It's a cultivation of effort. But this team's offense has at times moved better than offenses have than Nagy's past. If that makes any sense. I think this offense is one of the best looking offenses over the past couple of years. At times, at other times, it's one of the worst looking offenses in the past couple of years. So there are some flashes of brilliance in there. There are some good ideas. There are some good plays, but it's very clear that Bill Lazor needs to go. It's very clear Matt Nagy needs to go. I'm not giving up on Sean Desai. I think it's ridiculous to give up after a defensive coordinator after one season with his unit that he has right now, which is completely depleted at the secondary. But I'm really excited to get into offseason speculation, offseason scouting reports, all that jazz. Because at this point, there's no reason to really be excited about this season because we don't even know if Justin's going to play. But there's a lot of reasons to be excited about the offseason.
There certainly are, and we're just going to go ahead and end it right here because we're approaching like the 36-minute mark, guys. But lots of offseason talk, but that's not going to start until January 10th after the Bears officially fire Matt Nagy, or it could even be when the Bears go to Green Bay and lose. But I am going to say this, you know what? Make sure you're following us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Follow myself and Max on Twitter at MaxSmithESM and at Usayd Koshal. We'll be back on Thursday talking Bears, Packers. All right, it's going to be Matt Nagy's 8th game up at Lambeau Field, and he has yet to win a single one. There's only won one time against the Packers in 3 seasons, or I should say 4 seasons at this point. So hopefully that changes and Justin Fields gets his first win because I do think he's going to end up starting unless the Bears are basically going to let Matt Nagy have his way and trot Andy Dalton out there for the rest of this season. But bear down, ladies and gentlemen. Stay safe, stay warm. It's a typical Chicago winter outside right now, about 10 degrees, some flurries, 18 to 19 mile an hour winds. So shout out to all the young guys that show up to school in this weather wearing shorts, and those of you that just show up wearing only one hoodie. Okay, I don't know how you do it, but hats off to you. Max is grinning because he's probably or was one of those guys, but we're going to get out of here, guys. Bear down.